Hey, I'm Zach.
And I'm Jesse.
And on this episode, we're talking with the founders of a company we just visited in Austin, Texas, Monogram Orthopedics. This is a company working on a robot that can do knee replacement surgeries and more.
If you haven't checked out our in-depth, you definitely should, because they actually let me, a YouTuber, do a knee surgery.
And now I have to call him Dr. Jesse all the time. So Monogram is doing a crowdfunding round before they go public on the NASDAQ. And so you can learn more about that on our in-depth and also on their website, link down below. You'll definitely also want to check out this video where we speak with the co-founders, Dr. Doug Eunice and CEO Ben Sexton, about this amazing startup.
First up is our interview with co-founder Dr. Doug Eunice.
Doug, thanks so much for taking time today. I feel like I'm a fellow surgeon because I was hanging out with you in surgery and all. But thank you for taking time away from surgery today to talk to us.
Thanks for coming down. Yeah.
So really fascinating this morning watching the surgery. What made you decide to start this company? I mean, what was the impetus? Because you're a surgeon, you do this all day long yourself. Why do this company?
Yeah. You know, the impetus was really like, there are two things. There's manual, which is the way we've always done it with, you know, the kind of the way most knees are still done, most joint replacements are still done is with really crude tools. I mean, like if people saw how we actually do a knee replacement manually, it's a little bit shocking. It's like carpentry jigs.
Yeah, it's like woodwork.
Literally, it's like building it. Like we attach jigs to the bone and, you know, we're kind of eyeballing stuff and using just a handheld saw. And it works pretty well, but it's not super precise. I was mentioning earlier, we all, like 90% of surgeons think that they're above average. So we all overestimate like our skill, right? And it's like, you know, are we really that good? Are we really as good as we think we are? And now that we have more robotics coming online and we're getting data, we're seeing that we're not as good as we thought we were. And robotics can actually change the way we have always done surgery to really hit a target much more closely to restore the patient's actual anatomy, which, as I mentioned earlier, the better you restore their anatomy, the better the patients feel.
But what does that mean? I mean, you know, you're taking out what is essentially a hinge and you're replacing it with a hinge, right? I mean, how complicated is a knee really?
Right. I mean, you'd think that, right? So we were talking about it in the operating room, but you know, a knee isn't a simple hinge. It's a very complicated joint that not only bends and straightens, but it rotates, it rolls, it slides. And so the way that you tension the soft tissue, like all the ligaments and tendons in the knee, kind of dictates what we call the kinematics, or the way the knee moves. And the better you restore that, the more, if you talk to a patient a year after a knee replacement, the more likely they're going to be to say, yeah, I don't even remember which knee I had operated on because it basically feels like my knee. You know, whereas a knee that works and is just kind of a hinge and is working okay, maybe it doesn't hurt exactly, but their satisfaction isn't going to be great. So like we know that about 20% of knee replacement patients don't love their knee replacements. And part of that is that, you know, we're not restoring their kind of anatomy and their kind of kinematics to the length that we can with technology, like what we have. So, you know, the idea was really take robotics, make the surgery much safer, easier on the surgeon, easier on the patient, and faster. You know, we talked about the demands of doing more and more surgery, you know, and particularly doing it as an outpatient. We're sending people home the same day. If you have a technology that you can take the worst surgeon and have them do a perfect knee replacement in 20, 25 minutes, that's a big deal because it's a like bell-shaped curve. Like there are some surgeons are better than others. Some surgeons take longer than others. I mean, I've heard of knee replacements that take 6 hours, which is an outlier, no doubt. But with the right technology, every knee could be done by every surgeon perfectly and in a very quick amount of time, which is better for the patient. The less time they're in the operating room, better for the surgeon, it's better for the hospital.
Now, you mentioned that your father was a surgeon,
yeah,
and that in his day, he might do 2 surgeries a day.
Right. And he might do a back, a foot, a knee, you know, they did everything.
How many are you doing a day, or is people in your field doing a day now?
So I do 5 or 6 in a day. It's a lot. It's a lot, and it's tiring. I was telling you before, my back hurts at the end of a day, you know, And with robotics, it's a lot easier on your body, a lot easier on your psyche. There's a lot less stress if you kind of know that it's going to be, if you know that the plan that you set is going to be executed perfectly. That's where the stress comes from. And we work with residents. So trainees, if you have enabling technology that will keep them safe, it's less stressful for everybody.
Because I can't imagine, when you're teaching your son to drive, let's say, right? There's those just gray hair moments where you got to let him take the wheel. So you're letting people take the wheel because they have to learn, but then you have to step back and let them operate on my knee. What does that feel like?
It's like having your kids playing next to a busy highway, telling you they're not going to run in front of traffic, and you just don't really believe them. The traffic is there waiting to do something bad. So it's stressful. It's really, you have to kind of know the residents. You need to be comfortable with the residents, comfortable with their skill level, and as teachers, we need to kind of know what they can do, how much they can do, and it's graduated as they move on in levels. We let them do more. But again, it's a bell-shaped curve. I have some second-year residents that are like full-blown practicing that. Like their hands are good. Their decision-making is just better than the average person. So you kind of get a feeling for that and get to know them. But we talk a lot about how robotics is going to affect teaching, because there is good and bad. Mm-hmm. It's like they're going to lose some of that. Like my friend Adam, who's down here with me today, we grew up with manual surgery. Mm-hmm. So we can use a saw, and we have the touch. We know how to use a saw. They're definitely going to lose some of that, but it's kind of like flying a plane before instrumentation versus with instrumentation. Like, we're going to be flying planes with instruments because we have them. We're going to be doing joint replacements with technology. It just doesn't make sense to do it. It's safer.
Right.
Yeah.
And I want to talk, on the other end of the spectrum, we were just talking about students, but let's talk about the aging surgeon. I mean, the human body is not perfect. And as you get older, your eyesight or your coordination can start to go. What's that like? I mean, if you're a surgeon and you're relying, you're essentially very much in the same field as a craftsperson or something. You're relying on your body every day to do this job. And unlike building a brick wall or something like that, where mistakes can be made and amendments and fixes can be done, there's such a smaller room for error, but it is your livelihood. Yeah. What's the difference between, a surgeon who has all of their physical appointments in terms of hands, like you're talking about, and when that starts to go away, how do they know when to quit? And
that's a good question. It's a tough question. Surgeons, especially previous generation, their identity is tied up in being a surgeon, and sometimes they don't know when to hang up their cleats.
Yeah. Well, and you'd have so much experience too, right, because you're valuable. You've seen so much, and it's like you don't really want them to leave the operating room necessarily. Will robotics allow them to continue longer into a career, basically?
For sure. No question about it. It's just, and robotics and other enabling technology that's really takes a lot of this. Like I'm left-handed. My left hand has calluses like I'm a carpenter, because I basically am a carpenter. Mm-hmm. We work with our hands and our bodies. My shoulder, my back gets sore. Robotics really takes the stress off and allows you to do a lot of the important stuff virtually. So like you guys saw in the operating room, really what dictates the outcome is what we're doing on that screen before we've even touched the patient. Mm-hmm. And that's really where the experience comes in. Like, you're doing the important stuff with your mind, the way it should be, not so much with your body. So for sure, it'll extend physicians' careers.
Yeah. And to that point, and to get back into teaching, it's one thing when you have to, physically tell someone or show someone, what's going to happen. But it's hard when you don't have a simulation of what that is, what that looks like. And today on the operating table, we were able to take somebody's leg and bend it, and in augmented reality, see what was going to happen when you made the replacement, and you were able to adjust angles down to the degree and all of this stuff that I'm sure you could talk about before, but you couldn't really see it. And as someone who's never done surgery before, I was almost like, oh, I understand it.
Right.
And it's like, whoa. I didn't go to medical school. I don't know anything about a knee. And all of a sudden, I'm learning just by looking at a screen.
Absolutely. And you can see, like, there's a lot of iteration that you can do before you've cut the bone. Once you cut the bone, you bought it. So if you're off with your jigs, if you're off with your eyeball, which is kind of how we do it manually, once you've cut it, it becomes a lot harder to fix that without a robot. So we could do it virtually to get a really good plan. And even in the event with a robot, if that plan turns out to not be exactly what you want, you can go back and recut the bone to within like a half a degree, a half a millimeter to really fine tune it. That's very, very, it's hard to do that with manual instruments. It's almost impossible.
Because you have to reset jigs and all sorts of.
And it's hard to do. The jigs aren't designed for that kind of fine control. So, but look, I don't want to say that all of this is just unique to what we're doing. Like, there are competitors on the market that are doing all this. This is being done in orthopedics right now. I think where we're different is, we are, because we're machining these cuts with a constrained, really state-of-the-art arm, the cuts are absolutely perfect. Like, they are machined like you'd see in like a steel factory where they're cutting metal. So they're very precise, and the cuts are very safe. Like, we avoid all the soft tissue that some of the other systems, the soft tissue is a little bit more at risk theoretically. The other thing with our system, so you can do it safer, faster than the other robotic systems that are on the market. We're CT based, so we take a CAT scan of the patient and use that to create the plan. Because we have that data, we can, again, keep the saw safe within the bone boundaries. We can also do things like make custom implants, which is where I think things are going.
I want to talk about the implants for a second. So I didn't realize that kind of traditional surgery are these just pre-made implants and we all just get a generic implant, whereas you guys are working on these implants that don't need to be glued to the bone.
Right. And again, that's that people are, we're putting in press fit. We call them press fit or uncemented implants. Like, that's not unique to what we're doing. That's being done. But the better the cuts are, which in our case, they're absolutely pristine cuts, the more precisely you kind of balance the ligaments and tendons and all that, the better you're going to do with a press fit knee, the more likely it's going to be for the bone to grow into it and be successful. So robotics is really moving us away from cemented toward press fit or unccemented. Where we're taking it then to the next level is, rather than using off-the-shelf implants that come in just a limited array of shapes and sizes, we can tweak it so that it covers the bone much more precisely, with less overhang or underhang or whatever. And because we can take that saw and swap it out and put in like a rotary tool, like a Dremel, we can then do custom features inside the bone that are designed for that implant to engage the most supportive bone and be really, really low profile. So very thin, low profile implants, better for the patient, and hard to do with manual instruments. But we know where the bone is and we have a robot that can kind of get there. So again, you just can't, and I think it's going toward custom in the future for a few reasons. One is just going to be better for the patient. But the other is the economics of off-the-shelf implants are horrible. Like, the implant companies only turn over their inventory like 1.5 once a year. So it's their biggest single expense is that they have to hold all this massive amounts of inventory. Whereas if you're doing a custom, it's just in time. You don't have to hold these huge inventories. So it makes it a lot more economical. And with 3D printing, you can do these things pretty quick. Like, you can print a knee implant in 24 hours. There's stuff that has to happen after that, but like, you could have a custom knee probably in 3 or 4 weeks at this point. So, which is pretty good.
Because, I mean, like we were talking about earlier, a knee is not the simple hinge that you can go to the hardware store and buy. It's not this a dumb pivot point. You have bones that are sliding over each other, and then it's all surrounded by ligaments, and this is all how the human body works. Right? We're not robots. We're not at this point where it's just like, yeah, take out the knee and replace it with a. We're not doing that.
Nope.
We're trying. I mean, and the scary part for me is, there's all this soft tissue, and we can't really replace the soft tissue. It's not. We can deal with the bone. I mean, we can replace that with metal, but the ligaments, the soft tissue, they don't change. So when the knee changes, the soft tissues and the ligaments, they're all either stretched in the wrong direction, which leads to unsatisfied patients where their knee feels different because it's different. Like their knee, like I can't even imagine that. You get out of surgery and all of a sudden your skeleton has changed,
right?
And it no longer works the way you're used to it. And it's not just that, I bend my knee and my foot is in a different place that I'm used to. It's that it actually, you can feel it in your body being different.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Yeah, no, it's true. And the other thing that we can do with our robot that I think is different than some of the others on the market is, we designed it to be like a Swiss Army knife almost, where, we could use it for all kinds of different things. So we're starting with knees because that's really the biggest market. But we can do hips. We will be able to do hips, shoulder, ankles, spine. So there's a lot of stuff you can do. There's even stuff that's non-orthopedic that's outside of my area, but like oral maxillofacial. Like, there's a lot of stuff in the kind of the cranium, the jaw that we could probably do with our robot down the road.
So I want to get into profits for hospitals, right? I assume they want to move a patient in and out as quickly as possible. How does your system allow for that?
So, one of the things that hospitals hate is return to the operating room complications. So, you are eliminating a lot of the source for complications. It's much safer. You're not cutting stuff that shouldn't be cut. You're not going to be as likely to have to redo a knee replacement because it's too loose or too tight, which is not as uncommon as you might think, because again, we're eyeballing a lot of these things. And sometimes the patients have them and a few months later, like it's just wobbling. It feels too loose or it's too tight. I can't bend and straight.
Well, so what happens in that case? I mean, I'm assuming you just, open the knee again and you back out the screws and you just put in a new one. Am I right about that?
I wish you were right about that, but you got to take it all out a lot of the time. Like you need to take well-fixed implants, saw it out, like literally cut out the stuff that we put in.
Wait, so take out more than you originally took out?
Take out the metal and plastic. So you have to remove that stuff,
right?
And then start over and recut the bone. And
so now you're taking even less you, so to speak, if this is being done to you. So I mean, you don't want to be doing iterations because it's going to make it even harder for you.
It's way worse for the patient. Hospitals hate it. They're going to, the hospitals don't like these readmissions. Their hospitals are starting to get dinged for patients coming back for more surgery to kind of incentivize them to not have those kind of complications. So it's really, we're talking about, so the other thing is just speed. So like in a surgery center, for example, like a lot of joint replacements are going to outpatient settings. Those people have to go home the same day. And if you're trying to maximize profits in a surgery center, you need to do as many cases as quickly as you can and as safely as you can. Like you cannot have complications and you can't take 5 hours to do a knee replacement. So, and again, this is where it's going. So if you have technology that can do a knee replacement safely and perfectly in 20, 25 minutes, that's a moneymaker for surgery centers. So, that's a big buy-in, even at the cost of the technology.
What about markets outside the U.S.? I mean, I assume there's more people entering the middle class, more people that are getting injuries and want to have knee replacements and other. Is that a growing area of need for robotic surgery?
It's massive. I mean, if you look at countries like India and China, where they have these emerging middle classes, they have the number of patients that need knee replacements and hip replacements, et cetera, is far outstripping the number of surgeons that are really trained to do that. So to have something that is really enabling to take, surgeons that may not be fully trained, like my partner, Adam, he's a sports medicine doctor, and he's now doing knee replacements because he's the enabling technology that's now available makes him comfortable doing that. Like he was not comfortable doing knee replacements with manual instruments. So that's where this needs to go, is so that you can take a surgeon that's maybe a general surgeon, doesn't know how to do a knee, and they can do it perfectly.
Wow.
And it's really, I mean, it needs millions and millions of people. So
Because, I mean, I think when a lot of people think surgeons, they think, well, someone like you, where I have the utmost confidence that you can cut my body apart, put me back together again. But they might not be thinking about someone who, I mean, you talked about there being a bell curve. There's a bell curve. Like, sorry, that's how humans are.
Right.
There's always gonna be a bell curve, whether we're driving or doing surgery. And I think that can kind of, it scares off some people from maybe even wanting to get orthopedic surgery, even if they really need it. Do you think that this is going to build more confidence in consumers?
I think it's a lot like self-driving cars that you guys know a lot about. You know, there is going to be a tipping point where we've done enough of these surgeries, we've driven enough self-driving cars that we start to believe, yeah, this is actually safer, even though it's a little scary. We're not 100%. You know, after we've done enough patients and they've done better, and we can show that they're doing better, there's less complications, I think people are going to start to embrace it more. And already just the idea of it, like I was saying earlier, like I have patients emailing and calling when we do these webinars and stuff. They see what we're doing and it just makes sense to them. They're calling and say, can I be in a trial? I want to do this tomorrow. And we're just not quite there yet.
Right.
But I think it does make sense to patients too, and just intuitively.
But I mean, does this mean that we can unlock more orthopedic surgery, for lack of a better term? Like, can we be doing more per surgeon? I mean, if a lot of the cuts are going to be done robotically, do you need to have a surgeon kind of with the patient the whole time, or can some of it be automated in the future, maybe with a technician or someone who isn't either going to get paid quite as much as a surgeon, or hasn't had to have all the training?
Right. I mean, you just showed doing one remotely. You were in a different state.
Right. I mean, I think theoretically we could probably do that. I think from a regulatory standpoint, and I just don't know if we're ready for that yet. I think you're going to need to have some kind of surgeon with some expertise in the room, but maybe not somebody that's like fellowship trained in joint replacement surgery. So like, maybe a fellowship trained surgeon could be like doing the plan remotely and saying, okay, that looks good. And then maybe a general orthopedic surgeon is actually doing the surgery. I'm not sure if we're ready to have a technician there, but I think it's possible.
Well, and it couldn't happen without robotics.
Exactly. For sure it could. That's exactly
Hard to have a remote human without a robot.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the roadmap then going forward. How does Monogram tell the FDA that, okay, we're ready for prime time?
Yeah. So the first thing we have to do is get the robot cleared with a generic implant. So the implant we were just using there, it's an implant that we've licensed. It's nothing fancy. It's a good implant that's FDA cleared. So you have to clear the robot with some implant. So that's it. So, because to clear the robot with a custom implant, it's just a bigger nut than
too many things at once.
They just couldn't swallow it. It's too much. So we get the robot cleared, and then down the road we start adding different things like custom implants, like an uncemented partial knee replacement we're working on now. That'll probably be the next thing. Then hips, custom hip replacements, custom shoulder replacement. But the first thing is to get the robot cleared, and then we can start kind of adding custom on as we go down the road.
And so that's why you guys are using cadavers in surgery now, right? Because basically you just show the FDA, we did this surgery and it did as good as it would have done if we had done it with existing technology.
Exactly. So if we do a cadaver, we can check the accuracy of the cuts. Did it do what we planned? So here's our plan. Here's our easily checkable cuts that we actually made. Did it do that to within a degree of accuracy? Then we can check all the soft tissue. Did we cut anything that we didn't mean to cut? And we can check all the different tendons, ligaments, blood vessels, nerves, etc. So we check all that, and we do enough of those across big cadavers, small cadavers, a whole range, and we get a safety profile. We've done 150 cadavers. Nothing was cut. They shouldn't have been cut. Everything was accurate. So that's kind of what we would show them.
And then if investors who are watching are like, well, then you're going to have trouble finding a live human who wants to have it done. What's your answer to that?
I mean, based on the emails that I get, I don't think that's true at all. I mean, people are really interested in this, and I think it'll be pretty easy to get human, live patients to do it. And I think by that point, we will be comfortable with the technology that it is safe and it is going to be effective and accurate. So I think by the time it's in the operating room, we'll have no qualms about its safety.
It was really cool today to see another doctor, Dr. Cohen, using this technology. He'd never seen this particular technology before, but he does work with robots, like you said. How is it going to be when you're then trying to get other surgeons to use your technology?
So we've had a couple of other surgeons down here. It's a little tough for me because I don't want them coming down here and telling me my baby's ugly. Like Adam is an old friend of mine, so I can kind of take it from him. But so it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. But I would say our surgeon feedback's been really good. I mean, I think that they see that the robot is going to ultimately make their lives easier. And look, we're developing it. It's not a finished product yet, but the feedback's been really good. So I think that I'm encouraged that as we bring more surgeons down, that they're really liking it. And I think that's the key is if you don't get surgeon buy-in, you're dead in the water. You can have the coolest looking thing that surgeons think or that patients think sounds cool, but if the surgeons don't buy in, you're done. Because ultimately the surgeon is the one that kind of is pushing it on the hospital and saying, I want this piece of technology. I want this to be brought in. And if they're enthusiastic about it, you've got a good chance of getting it adopted and bought by the hospitals.
But what about, so we cover this thing called the Osborne effect on the show a lot, which is like, if you're just waiting for the next thing, you'll just wait for that. And you're talking about some cool things coming down the road. Why wouldn't, if I need a knee replacement now, why wouldn't I just wait till you've figured it all out in 10 years? Yeah, I mean,
Look, patients are not getting any younger. When people have debilitating arthritis, they don't, a lot of times they just, like my dad just had his knee replaced about a month ago. We took him to Italy last summer and he couldn't walk. And he's an independent guy. He's an orthopedic surgeon. My son was pushing him around the Vatican in a wheelchair. And I never thought I'd see that. He's like such an independent guy. But he just had to do it. And he didn't have a choice at a certain point. One thing is that it's just dire for a lot of people. But the other thing is, yes, better stuff is going to be coming down the road. That's always going to be the case. But the state of the art right now is pretty good. It's about to get significantly better with our robot. And then, yes, it'll get better with custom implants. But as far as like really doing the job, it's going to be pretty good, even without the custom implants. That's just kind of next level stuff.
I was just so shocked to hear that the cements that have been used in kind of the current technology, doesn't last forever.
It does not last. I mean, it's literally like grout in a bathroom. It's just like grouting in bathroom tiles. I mean, we actually take like a glue gun and squirt it into the bone and it hardens, but it's just like a pouring cement sidewalk. It's just going to be cracked if you come back 10 years later. So, what you want is, especially as we're operating younger and younger patients, you want something that the patient's bone will actually grow into, like filling in the nooks and crannies in an English muffin. You want that type of because it's live tissue, so it's going to remodel as the patient gets older. So it'll just last longer.
I feel like people don't know that because, I mean, you kind of think, well, I stopped growing when I turned, 22 or whatever. I stopped getting taller. You think that your bones stopped growing, but that's not really how bones work.
No.
Bone is the coolest tissue in the body, I think, arguably.
You already said cartilage.
I'm cheating, but it's bone. It's bone. No, bone's cool. It's bone is amazing. It remodels. We can do cool stuff with bone, and it's when we're doing a joint replacement, we're almost creating like a fracture, like we're creating bleeding bone that will then heal in some way. It's going to heal to whatever you put on it. And one of the cool things about 3D printing is that bone likes certain things more than it likes others. So it likes really small pore sizes. So it likes the nooks and crannies to be really small. And you can create these kind of small asymmetric porous structures that look kind of like bone. And the bone just grows right into it. So that's something that with traditional manufacturing was harder to do. So it's very cool what we can do with 3D printing. So not only just the gross shape that we can use to match the patient, but the microscopic kind of structure, we can create something that's going to be super bone friendly. So it's pretty cool.
I really appreciate that you invited us in today, because I got to see your team in action during a surgery where there was communication and things, hey, can we change this to the next version? And really smart team. What was it like? You've been working on this as a company for years. What was it like when you started? You had this idea, like, we can do this better, but like, how did you turn that into a company?
I mean, I literally was just a surgeon with a cocktail napkin idea. I mean, I had no team, no nothing. And it was really just this basic concept of get the best robot and 3D print implants and custom prepare the bone. That was the idea. It was that simple. And I got an NIH grant through my medical school to buy a robot. I bought a robot. I found a robot engineer who was bored in his day job that agreed to work nights and weekends to kind of develop a proof of concept. And it all just kind of went from there. You know, we kind of limped along with no real money. And then Ben came along. And Ben, I just had cold called him at this company that he was working for, because his company made like the end effector pieces for robots. And I needed one for my robot that I had. And he was the guy that I needed to get on the phone. It was just fate, because he's like a outside of the box thinker. He was looking for something exciting to do, and he latched right onto it and ultimately convinced the company that he was working for to give us our first real funding. I ultimately asked his boss, "Can I take your guy?" So he came over, and it's been great. I mean, he's really the kind of the engine behind the company. I mean, he has raised money. He's the marketing genius. You know, he's been an amazing partner. But between the two of us, we've hired a full team of engineers, and to see the idea kind of evolve in the real world has been unbelievable. Like, to see my friend Adam down here playing with my toy is pretty cool. I gotta say, it's pretty amazing. It's nerve-wracking, but it's amazing. It's surreal, really.
What is it like thinking about the fact that you guys may be going public?
So I'm not the right guy to ask, because I mean, the whole thing makes me nervous, but I think it's incredibly exciting. You know, all my mom cares about is that I get to ring the bell in NASDAQ. Oh my God, that happens. But it's really exciting. You know, I mean, this is, it costs a lot of money to get this product to market, but it's a huge market. And I think that going public's really going to help us raise the money that we need to get this thing out there. And it really will be the best in class in this $20 billion market. So I think the IPO is really going to give us the juice to get there. So I'm really excited about it.
And lastly, you know, I heard that when penicillin came on the market back in the day, that it took like 15 years for doctors to learn about it and to use it. What do you think this technology is going to be like when it emerges? Are people kind of waiting for it, or are they skeptical?
So I think, you know, the big competitor that's in the market, was really ahead of the curve when they came out. They were a startup. It came online in like 2009 and ultimately got bought by one of the big implant companies in 2013, which really blew them up. But surgeons were really resistant when they first came out, because again, 90% of us think we're above average. And we thought, why do we, you know, there's a lot of like, why do we need robotics? We're better than a stupid robot. But ultimately we're not better, and which is why the robot hasn't gone anywhere. But they really, over the years, caused that skepticism to dissipate. And so we kind of have now second mover advantage. You know, we can basically we can correct some of the mistakes that they made, but build on the kind of the acceptance that they've also, you know, kind of fostered in a surgeon community. So I think, look, my residents who are gamers and they're younger than I am, they're all in. They don't even think about it. They're like, I'm not using a freaking jig. What is that? I'm not a caveman, you know. So I think as guys come up through the training, they're going to be very comfortable with it. And now we're getting into like AR and goggles, and that's kind of the next thing that's going to start happening, is that we're doing virtual reality, and that's definitely on the horizon. So
That's
Cool
exciting.
times. Yeah.
So how long before we have the, the med bay, you just kind of slide yourself into the
Star Trek
little thing and then you,
the tricorder.
yeah, I mean, or just, oh no, half my body's missing and you get put into a thing and then they pull you out again and you're all back to normal.
Might be a few years. We're not working on that.
But this is a step along the way.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Yeah, it's
So,
exciting.
Yeah, it is.
Thank you for
Thanks so
your time.
much, guys. Appreciate it.
Wow, that was so great to pick Dr. Eunice's brain.
Next up is Ben Sexton, Monogram Orthopedics co-founder and CEO. Hey, I feel smarter because I'm wearing the scrubs.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Well, I'm excited you guys got in there.
Yeah, it was so fun to watch surgery today. Thank you so much for letting us be part of it because, as I was saying to Doug, I loved watching your team. I loved watching the communication, the interaction, the like, hey, let's change this on the next thing. So great to be able to see your team at work. It was amazing.
Yeah, you guys saw the raw experience.
Yeah.
Engineering is not a linear path.
So when we first started talking to you guys at Monogram, I didn't know what a knee surgery today entailed. I thought that, they would bring out some kind of laser or some sort of
Ultrasonic or something.
well, you hear about all these surgeries where there's like, and I just have these two little things. And you're like, wow, I guess we've, gotten to the point in surgery where it's just not that big a deal.
No, but you're seeing right now what it looks like. Actually.
Yeah, it's when I started to hear about, jigs and saws and hammers, and I went, wait a minute, I recognize some of this stuff as a woodworker. I started to get a little alarmed. I'm like, wait, I thought this was the 2020s. I thought that we would have, robots. So I was more relieved when we, came into the operating room and there's going to be a robot making some of these cuts, because man, is it a little medieval.
Yes, it really hits you when you see it after it's been cut, before you put the implant on. Like the first time you see that, and you're like, "Whoa, there's no coming back from that."
Right?
It's an amputation.
Yeah, because there's always the measure twice, cut once.
Yes,
As a carpenter, you learned that very early on, and the idea of a board stretcher. That's a joke. There is no putting the bone back on.
No.
So every cut is extraordinarily important because this isn't a cabinet. You can't go, oh, well, we'll throw out that tibia.
Yeah,
That's your
let's
tibia.
do this again. Yeah. It's like the finicky aspect of it too takes a little bit to appreciate. I mean, you saw how much time is spent planning, like measuring gaps, looking at okay, how is this knee actually gonna work in flexion, extension?
Thinking about, also carpentry, normally the carpenter has everything under control. We've got the blade with a guard and a fence, and I'm going to push it on the table saw, and you can't do that with somebody's knee.
Well, also you can take as much time as you want. Whereas with your,
yeah.
you've got someone under and they've got their leg tourniqueted and like you've got less than an hour.
Yes,
Like
exactly. Yeah.
So I want to know, we were talking to Doug and he was saying that like he had this idea and he started toying around with robots and then he called you. What was that like?
So, Doug is not your traditional surgeon. He really should have been an engineer, and he's an orthopedic surgeon. And there are some people who kind of just get it, and Doug's one of those guys who just gets it. So I was in the orthopedic space before I met Doug, and I knew the problems that we're seeing today existed, but it wasn't clear what the solution was or how to pull it all together. So when Doug said, hey, I think there's an inventory problem. I think that robots can be better. I think that robots should be better. We should push the envelope. What we see today is a Gen 1 solution. He was saying, yes, nod, violent agreement. And he's like, and I'm doing it. Okay. It didn't take long to convince me that this was a good idea. What was the challenge was, how do you take on something this ambitious? That was really the challenge, because this is a very complex development. There's a lot of moving parts. And my concern was always, how do we get the capital to turn this into a reality? We know it's good. And anytime we would talk to someone, hey, we need money, nobody could say anything negative about the business model. Never about the business model. It's just, this is going to take too much capital, and there's other places people wanted deploy capital, less kind of risky. So that was really, Doug and I were in violent agreement. The big question was, can we actually convince people to support this mission? But honestly, it didn't take a lot of arm twisting. I'm the kind of person who, if you're on the edge of your seat, you're taking up too much space. Like I was not born to live in a cubicle. Like cubicle life it's just not really me. And it didn't take long for me to realize, like, screw it, I'm going to do it. And actually, the reason Monogram exists is my wife. So I'm an entrepreneur. I was an entrepreneur before I joined Monogram. Of all things, I was in the wedding business. So I was working in a cubicle and, suffocating. And my wife was doing like makeup and hair for the wedding industry. And she convinced me that, hey, like, I think we should be selling like veils and things like that. And I was like, you know what? Even though I was an engineer, I'd spent all this time like studying, you know what? So my wife and I built this business, and she was really the sales side of it. And I was kind of more operations, and that's where I learned a lot of really valuable things about just how to run a business, like working capital, inventory, like managing a supply chain. Some of the things that I think a lot of startup people don't realize until they get into it.
Because you're doing actual business. You weren't doing startup business in the wedding industry.
Yes. But, it wasn't like what I was going to do the rest of my life, but I just loved the idea of building something. Building a company is still engineering, just engineering in a different way. And so I told my wife, I love this. I love the idea. And she's like, you have to go do it. So we went to like a single income. And my wife didn't get paid for 2 years. And we just did it. We had a kid along the way. It was like not exactly the easiest thing in the world. She was very supportive. And Doug and I would just the two of us. And then at one point we brought in Sanath. He was our first employee. It was just kind of door to door pitching, scraping and clawing, getting some money here, then using that to snowball to get. And then finally, nobody was giving us any money. And it was like, this is not a bad idea. And it's always like the chicken and egg thing. So we'd go to a VC and say, we love it. Who's your team? It's like, well, you're looking at the team. Well, come back to us when you have a team. And it's like, okay, but
can afford a team.
Like, not everybody has a wife who can like let them do their dream job, right? So that was like the biggest challenge to overcome, was like that chicken and egg, that initial money to start making things happen. But we ended up crowdfunding. So we got our first capital through a group called Seed Invest. And then I don't know what happened. Like the story just resonated. I guess people like the idea of this. And it was very intuitive to them. Like, okay, well, we're doing knee replacements. We're doing it in this really barbaric fashion. And here's a better solution. It was a very easy story to tell. And that's how I started to know, like, there is a pain point here. There's a lot of people who care about this. And then it was kind of one thing after another. But we have now an amazing team. Like you kind of talked about the teamwork.
Well, and it's incredible. You have 17,000 investors.
Yes.
Like, that's incredible.
It is, yeah. And they're huge fans. Like, what we're trying to cultivate is something like, you guys know what the Tesla fan base is like. Like, we want that. So that when we go to market, we hopefully are going to already have kind of this sort of pre-primed group to sell to. So we're doing a lot of unique things in that way.
What does it feel like to go from, this scrappy startup, and you guys have that feeling? It feels really good. I love scrappy startups. You don't feel like one of those bloated startups where it's like, get me my coffee. But now you're talking about going public. What does that feel like?
The reason we're going public is, there's a lot of reasons, but it's not because we're pretentious and it's like, well, what does a startup do? They go public. Like, everything we're doing is like driven by a need and demand. And we're at a point where we need access to deeper capital basically. We need institutional investors to help support the story. And we've talked to those investors, and their concern is the way that the company is now structured, because we have 17,000 investors, is it's something we have to do to clean things up. So what's going to happen when we go public is all of our shareholders are going to become common shareholders, and we're going to look like any other company. And it's not going to matter that we were crowdfunded. And I'm proud of being crowdfunded. And I love the fact that we have people who have given us $250, right? And for some people that means a lot. And I really want to reward them. And I believe that the valuation of this round is going to be accretive. I'm hopeful, cautiously optimistic. That's not a guarantee by any means, but we've always tried to bring in money at a price that we think reflects the intrinsic value of the company. It hopefully is accretive for people who are coming in. And so I think it's a way to just kind of keep the ball going, start to tap into different pools of capital. But we've never been like a very pretentious company. I think we try and keep both feet on the ground. I know that our CTO and myself, like, we're just very much like hard work, best ideas win, don't have like domains.
I loved it today. We were watching in the operating room, and there's a little bit of camaraderie between, Doug on the surgeon side and the engineer side, and it was really great to watch.
Yes.
Yeah.
Isn't it? It's like really tough, like, because sometimes you can't just capitulate, right? And we're very data driven. So it's great how you feel about something, and feelings are important, but like, what is the data behind this? Like, are you...
Well, I love that there was this point here where there's this part of the process of the surgery where you have to register the knee and know where it is in space, and that takes some time, and the existing robot technology with other companies has to do the same thing. But you guys have found a way, it looks like, to shave time off of that. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So, and this is where, all credit to the engineering team. Like, I mean, and really what we've tried to do is ignore the competition, like purge your brain of how it's being done completely. Let's understand the problem and try and figure out how to solve this problem with no constraints. And that's what they did. So,
I mean, no offense to Jesse, but even Jesse could register a knee faster than the competition could. Like, you did it in 45 seconds or so.
Yeah, and I've never seen the bone inside your knee before.
Yes.
So that's kind of phenomenal.
Yeah, I got maybe 30 seconds worth of instruction from a surgeon, but I was able to do it in 45 seconds, and then we were able to get operating.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's really a testament to the team and like the creative energy of the team. And really, we filter every decision through the patient. And it's like, there's a lot of companies that it's like, we're going to try and get to market as quickly as possible. And we're going to do that by trying to copy and paste and tweak and, let's find this piece of code and copy and paste it. We really try not to do that.
Right. Or have something that's just of a lesser quality. Yes. And then later down the road, don't worry, we'll come out with the thing. No, I really got the sense that you were trying to make something that is going to be very useful from the beginning.
Yeah. I mean, for me, when it comes to like asking a shareholder, like, give me your money, I have to believe it. I have to. Like, I actually have to believe what I'm saying. But at the end of the day,
I almost feel like, forget the shareholder.
Yeah.
Money's money. Yes. Money grows back infinitely. Yes. You can work for money. I feel like it's the person who's going to be on the operating team.
Of course, yeah.
It's like, because that is really, you have to stand behind that.
Like, some of those decisions, like, are not going to affect the outcome. If the registration, it's better, certainly, yes. Mm-hmm. But I would be hard pressed to say that we're making a meaningful clinical difference by saving a couple of minutes of registration time.
Sure.
Maybe it is, but but there are decisions we've made where we're going, we have to be better. Like, we have to be. We have to be able to look people in the eye and say, we really tried to do something better. We didn't just try and do like a Me Too. We really tried to push things forward. And I think we've I think we've accomplished that. We've taken some huge risks. That sagittal saw that you see on there, so our system is active, right? The user is not grabbing an end effector and moving it around. The challenge is every active system or company that's tried to do an active system has used a rotary tool. We used a rotary tool as well initially because it's a lot easier. The engineering challenges are much less significant with a rotary tool. The problem is that we just couldn't optimize the time. It would take the surgeon would just be there and go get me a cup of coffee and they'd be back 20 minutes later. And we had a critical decision as a company. We had raised a bunch of money and we got to a point where we said, what is the best we could ever optimize this system to be? And we came to the conclusion it was going to be 12 or 13 minutes of just passive time, the surgeon kind of time. And that's not good enough. It
won't be adopted if it takes that long, right?
Yeah, maybe we could convince ourselves that it would be adopted, but I said it's not the best use of what we were just entrusted with to just get something to market that could work like this. We have to believe it's better. We have to. So we made a decision to pivot to a sagittal saw. I don't know if Doug talked to you at all about that decision, but that was a very risky decision. We haven't done a ton of work. And then we said, you know what? The only way to do this is to go to a sagittal saw. Can we do that? Kind of said, it was not 100% certain it could be done. We talked to some of the there's a consultant companies that have done this before, and they said it was impossible. One of the engineers who had worked on the first Mako system, you can't actively cut with a sagittal saw, no way. And we had all kinds of problems. So we pivoted. The vibration of the end effector was breaking the robot. So we had to figure out a way to basically dampen the vibration. I mean, we've been through so many design iterations of that end effector. We brought in a company that tunes high performance race cars, and they put sensors all over the end effector, and they're figuring out, okay, here's this part weighs too much. They were analyzing things in slow motion, how are things interacting? So we were able to drastically, what's the optimal, we had a passive damper at one point, we were able to remove that, but just fine tuning all of these things. And we got to a point where okay, we have an end effector that's not breaking the arm. Then it was, how do you make these cut paths? And so we took some huge risks, but at the end of the day, we believed in what we were doing. It was I would rather do that and believe in it than just trying to get something out there. Yeah. So
the grit, I love that.
That's always been our philosophy. Yeah. So
love that.
Yeah. And our team is great. I mean, everybody, when you're an engineer, that's I think the team likes that.
Yeah, I mean, when some problems came up today, your engineering team, I could see they're working on the solution. They didn't just go well, don't worry about it.
No.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's such an advantage of being a startup. There are so many times with so many different companies where, a problem will arise. And if it's not scrappy enough, if the company is not scrappy enough and the people working on these teams are not problem solvers enough
or dedicated,
or if they're just problem pushers and it's no, well, we'll figure that out eventually, or we'll get there eventually.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I know how to solve it, and you and me, we're going to sit down in a room and take care of it. I just think that's it was really nice to see that today, where obviously we're watching these tests happen, and it's actual improvements happening in real time. It's just it's so important.
I guarantee you this knee is going to be better. I guarantee you. I guaranteed. I know it will. It's just the thing is, as a boss, my job is not to be my job is to help people solve problems. That's why I'm here. It's not to be some
That's when it's done.
or to yell at people when things aren't like. My job is to try and help get this done right. So we always try and have that culture. I hate arrogance in an engineering culture, where I don't care if you can have like the smartest guy in the world, and if the way he interacts with other people is like condescending and not helpful, can just become really toxic. If you have people who think like, I'm just going to optimize inside my little bubble, and I'm not going to worry about the interfaces to other systems or how what I'm doing affects somebody else. As long as what I did is good, that's all I care about. That kind of thinking is not really what we try and cultivate. It's like, no, like we're successful when the product works, and let's work together to make that happen as a team. Yeah. So, not that there's like never friction, but if everybody's kind of pulling the same way and wants the same thing, which is ultimately we all want this to work, I think it's really helpful.
Now, a lot of investors, including me, shy away from medical companies because of 3 little letters, FDA. It scares me. I don't know anything about it. And I'm just like, I don't know, it's a magic room, something goes on in there. And so I kind of just stay away because it's not my area of expertise. Yes. I can imagine you guys need the FDA to approve your technology. Yes. What are the next steps with them? How is that going to work?
Sure. And I'll be like fully transparent. And we tell every investor this, like, don't give us your money if like without understanding the risk of the FDA, right? Because it could always take us longer and be more expensive than we think. So that's like the caveat I always give going in. But what the FDA is there to try and do ultimately is they want to be convinced that that your product is basically safe. That's ultimately what they care about. And so there are regulatory pathways for medical devices that allow you to claim substantial equivalence to a product that's already gone through that exercise and convince them they're safe. So the Mako system, for example, is already on the market. It's done many, 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 many surgeries. The FDA is comfortable that it's a safe system. So if I can take my system and show the FDA, here's how I'm safer than that system, then it accelerates your time to market. Basically, there's not a lot of regulatory uncertainty from the standpoint of, how long is it going to take? What's the path? What is the FDA going to need to see with some clinical? It's not like a biologic where you have this really complicated clinical trial. You know exactly what you're looking for with outcomes. It's very obvious what a successful knee looks like to a trained surgeon. So our process is going to be, that's a 510K. So it's a clinical pathway. It's kind of like an accelerated pathway that's in place to foster innovation, because we shouldn't be reinventing the wheel, basically. So what we're going to do is our predicate is the Mako system. So we have to show the FDA why we're equivalent to their system. And then we have to show them why we're safer. Basically, every single element of our system. So if you were to ask me pretty much anything about the system, we'll have a reason for how we're safer. So like how we generate our cut paths, where our bone boundaries are, that we externally fixate, the response time of the foot pedal, like how long would it take a surgeon to pull the end effector back versus ours moving back, or just all of these things. Like we just did a test of running a surgery from New York City, right? It wasn't just marketing. It's really demonstrating what's the latency of our system. Like, could you even do it from that far away? So all that to say that our expectation is to have more clarity soon.
We kind of got interrupted there at the end because Jesse was being called into the operating room.
Paging Dr. Jesse.
Wow. I mean, how great was it to get to speak to both of the co-founders of this amazing company? I want to personally thank Dr. Doug Eunice and also Dr. Cohen for personally walking me through my first surgery.
Yeah.
I feel like I got to skip the line, and they held to open the velvet rope for me, because normally I'd have to spend years and years at medical school. I'd like 48 years. How long does it take medical school?
Years. Yeah.
So, I mean, it was so cool to be in that operating room and to use this robot to do this actual surgery. You can check out our in-depth on Monogram and my surgery, where I performed the robotic knee replacement with about 3 minutes of training. You can see the knee replacement here on Disruptive Investing, and of course the in-depth is over on Now You Know.
Now, if you're interested in possibly investing in Monogram Orthopedics on the crowdfunding round, definitely check out their website. We'll put the link down below for more information. And join our Patreon if you want to see my post-op interview with Dr. Jesse here. Thanks so much for joining us on Disruptive Investing. Make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the notification button for more disruptive content.